Ancient Egypt is often remembered for beauty, golden masks, sacred temples, perfect pyramids rising into the desert sky. But beneath that golden surface was fear, because Egypt was not just a civilization of gods and monuments, it was a civilization of order, and order must be enforced. What happened when someone stole from a temple? What happened when a worker betrayed the pharaoh? What happened when a grave robber disturbed the dead? The answer is not romantic. It is not glamorous. It is brutal. Punishments in ancient Egypt were not only physical, they were psychological, spiritual, eternal. Because in Egypt, death was not the end. And that made punishment far more terrifying. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Echoes of History, where lost voices of the past finally get to speak. Tonight, we step into the darker side of one of history's greatest civilizations, the crimes, the consequences, and the punishments designed to protect divine order. Because in Egypt, justice was not optional, it was sacred. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was not merely a ruler, he was a god on earth. To disobey him was not just rebellion, it was sacrilege. The concept that governed Egyptian law was ma'at. Ma'at represented truth, balance, cosmic order. If someone disrupted ma'at, they threatened the universe itself. Punishments reflected this belief. Minor crimes, theft, tax evasion, lying in court, could result in beatings or forced labor. Labor in mines, labor in quarries, hard labor under the desert sun. But crimes against the state? That was different. Conspiracy, treason, attempted assassination. Records from the reign of Ramesses III describe a royal harem conspiracy. High-ranking officials plotted to kill the pharaoh. When the conspiracy was discovered, trials were swift. Some conspirators were ordered to take their own lives, others were executed. But the punishment extended beyond death. Names were erased. Faces were chiseled off monuments. To erase someone's name in Egypt was to erase their afterlife. This was not just execution. It was eternal annihilation. Imagine knowing that not only will you die, but your soul will wander forever without remembrance. That was the true terror, and it worked. Egypt lasted over 3,000 years. Fear maintained balance. But what about ordinary citizens? Their punishments were just as severe. Ancient Egypt had prisons, but long-term imprisonment was rare. Why? Because prisons cost resources. Instead, punishment was immediate and public. Beatings were common. Corporal punishment using rods or sticks. Public humiliation reinforced fear. For theft, punishment could include restitution multiple times the stolen value, forced labor, branding, amputation in severe cases. But one crime stood above the rest: grave robbing. Egyptians believed the body must remain intact for the soul to survive. To rob a tomb was not simple theft, it was spiritual murder. During the New Kingdom, tomb robberies became widespread. Workers from Deir el-Medina, ironically the very craftsmen who built tombs, sometimes turned to theft during economic hardship. When caught, punishments were extreme: beatings, mutilation, execution. Some records describe impalement or drowning, not described in graphic detail, but severe enough to deter others, because tomb robbery threatened not only wealth, but eternity. And then there were crimes involving false accusations or corruption. Judges who accepted bribes could face removal, disgrace, and severe penalties. Even officials were not immune. Justice in Egypt was hierarchical, but it was not lawless. Yet there was one punishment that stood above all others, the most feared, the most final. Execution existed in ancient Egypt. Beheading, drowning, burning in extreme cases. But what terrified Egyptians most was divine judgment. They believed that after death, the heart would be weighed against the feather of Mahi. If the heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by Ammit, a creature part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. To be devoured meant something worse than death. It meant the soul ceased to exist. No afterlife, no fields of reeds, no reunion with family, just nothing. This belief system made moral behavior part of survival. The legal system mirrored the cosmic one. Earthly punishment was only the beginning. Eternal consequences awaited. And this belief made punishment more powerful than physical pain, because pain ends, but spiritual erasure does not. However, it's important to understand something. Ancient Egypt was not uniquely brutal. Compared to many later civilizations, its legal system was structured, documented, and often proportional. Records showed trials, evidence, witnesses, written confessions. It was not chaos. It was controlled severity, and that may be why it endured. Because punishment in Egypt was not random cruelty. It was enforcement of order, and order was survival. When we look at ancient Egypt, we see pyramids glowing under the sun. But behind every monument stood law. Behind every law stood fear. And behind that fear was a belief that the universe itself depended on justice. Perhaps that is why their civilization lasted so long, because they believed something powerful, that actions echo beyond life, that balance must be protected, that order must be defended, and whether through rods, exile, erasure, or divine judgment, Egypt made one message clear: chaos would not win. Thank you for joining Echoes of History, where lost voices of the past finally get to speak.